I mean, for me, Nordschleife was fantastic.
Then also I stopped racing and then we all together.
Listen, guys, something is seriously wrong in Formula One right now. Hold on, because the man who dominated this sport for 4 straight years is sitting 8th in the championship. His car is broken, his engineer is leaving, and he is openly questioning whether he even wants to be here anymore. Let me show you something. A driver who once seemed unbeatable is now waking up every single morning and convincing himself to keep going. Today, we are breaking down everything. The car, the rules, the crisis, and the big question. Is Max Verstappen about to quit F1?
The 2026 regulations, why everything changed. So before we talk about Verstappen specifically, we need to understand what changed this season, because without this context, none of the chaos makes sense. For 2026, Formula One introduced the biggest regulation overhaul in the sport's history. The power units now run on a 50-50 split between internal combustion and electrical energy, which sounds great on paper, but in reality, it has turned these cars into incredibly difficult machines to drive. Drivers are being forced to lift and coast at the end of straights just to harvest enough electrical energy for the next acceleration phase. The active aerodynamic system is also completely new, and the whole philosophy of how you attack a lap has been flipped upside down. Verstappen himself said it best: the cars have fundamentally changed the nature of qualifying and racing, and not in a good way. This is the battlefield he is walking into every single race weekend in 2026.
Red Bull's nightmare start, the RB22 problem. Now here's where it gets really painful for Verstappen fans. Red Bull, the team that built the most dominant car in modern F1 history, is currently sitting 6th in the Constructors' Championship, tied on points with Alpine. Alpine! Let that sink in for a second. The RB22 has been struggling with no grip, no balance, massive tire degradation, and a broken race start procedure under the new hybrid rules. In Australia, Verstappen crashed in qualifying, started from 20th on the grid, and somehow carved his way up to 6th, which was actually a heroic drive when you think about it. Then in China, the wheels completely fell off. He described the car as incredibly tough to drive, saying every single lap is a fight, and he could not score a single point across the sprint or the Grand Prix. Then in Japan, he crossed the line in 8th, stuck behind an Alpine he simply could not pass. For a driver of his caliber, this is genuinely agonizing to watch.
The start problem, a technical deep dive that most people are not talking about enough. Under the 2026 regulations, the removal of the MGU-H means drivers now have to rev their engines much higher for at least 10 seconds before the start, just to spool up the turbocharger properly. On top of that, they need to harvest sufficient electrical energy during the formation lap so they have good acceleration off the line. Verstappen has failed to nail this procedure in every single race so far this season. In Australia, he cited no battery as the reason for his slow getaway. In China, the same issue dropped him to last place on the opening lap, both in the sprint and the Grand Prix. This is not just a driver issue, it is a car and calibration issue, and Red Bull openly admitted they have significant shortcomings with the RB22 right now. Verstappen himself pointed to energy deployment, engine calibration, and communication between the car and the team as the key areas they urgently need to fix.
Lambiase is leaving, the emotional blow. Now, just when you thought things could not get more complicated, Red Bull dropped another bombshell this week. Gianpiero Lambiase, the man who has been Verstappen's race engineer since his very first race with Red Bull back in 2016, is leaving for McLaren no later than the 2028 season. This is not just a professional relationship. These two have been through everything together. The early struggles, the championship fights, the 4 consecutive titles. Verstappen had previously said publicly that he would consider retiring if he and Lambiase ever split up. His father Jos recently said Max will just carry on, and apparently the Verstappen camp actually encouraged Lambiase to take this opportunity with McLaren, calling it a huge move for him. But even with all of that, this is a deeply personal loss, and it adds another layer of uncertainty to an already turbulent season. And this brings us to the most alarming part of this whole story. After the Japanese Grand Prix, Verstappen made a confession that genuinely shocked the paddock. He said, and these are his actual words, "Every day I wake up, I convince myself again, many times." He also said he is thinking about everything inside this paddock and seriously questioning whether the grind of 22 race weekends a year is worth it when he is not enjoying the sport he loves. He talked about wanting to be home more, seeing his friends more, spending time with his family. This is not a driver who is just frustrated after a bad race weekend. This sounds like a man who is genuinely reevaluating his relationship with Formula One as a whole, and that should concern everyone in the sport deeply.
Verstappen at the Nürburgring 24 Hours qualifiers. Here is something that actually tells you a lot about where Verstappen's head is right now. During Formula One's enforced spring break, instead of resting, he went racing at the Nürburgring 24 Hours qualifiers, driving a Mercedes-AMG GT3 alongside Lucas Auer for his own Mercedes-AMG Team Verstappen Racing. This is a man who genuinely loves motorsport in its purest form, away from the politics, away from the regulations debate, away from the championship pressure. His team did receive a grid penalty after a qualifying crash involving Auer, dropping them from 6th to 9th on the grid. But the point is, he chose to be there. When F1 stopped giving him joy, he went and found his joy somewhere else. And honestly, you kind of respect that.
The big question. So here is where we land after all of this. Verstappen has a contract with Red Bull until 2028. F1 boss Stefano Domenicali has said he understands the bigger picture and must be heard. But the reality is that no contract can keep a driver who has fallen out of love with the sport. If Red Bull cannot fix the RB22 before Miami, if the regulations do not start producing racing that Verstappen can get excited about, and if the weight of everything, the car, the engineer departure, the motivation battle, becomes too heavy, then we could genuinely be watching the beginning of the end of one of the greatest careers Formula One has ever seen. The next race is Miami. Red Bull needs answers, and so do we.